What is up, everyone? Welcome into the Fight HQ podcast as we are here to break down UFC 294 goes down on Saturday over in Abu Dhabi. Early start time here in the United States. If you're like me and Pete, living on the East Coast, lock is 10 a.m. East Coast time, pay-per-view 2 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, maybe if you're out on the West Coast, you got to get up bright and early, make sure your lineups are ready to rock and roll. 7 a.m. Eastern time, Pacific time for those prelims, which I actually saw the other day. It looks like ESPN's actually going to be streaming the prelims on their YouTube channel as well. So maybe I would imagine that majority of people who are checking this out, Pete, probably have an ESPN Plus subscription, but I'm looking forward to this one. Of course, as always, appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of the podcast. Of course, a great way to show your support for the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you know when we are live here on the channel. I guess I should probably tell Pete we got to do the show Friday of next week. Pete, you're finding that out now. We got to do the show on Friday next week because Thursday I'll be up in Buffalo for the Bucks game there. Of course, we got our DraftKings contest. That is live there. Of course, we got our Discord channel. But, of course, we're here to talk everything going on with the UFC. Of course, last week, Pete, we come in off a card where Edson Barboza gets 10-8 in the first round. Then goes on to win 4 straight rounds to go out there. You had to have Edson Barboza in your lineups, and man, it's Edson Barboza. Man, he just keeps doing this thing.
Yeah, he does, and let me tell you, the underdogs just keep on rolling in the main events. I mean, my goodness, it's been like what 6 straight, 7 straight, something crazy like that, and that's why I always say prioritize main event, co-main event, underdogs. But I just think Edson Barboza is a tough test to begin with, and the range is something we talked about, where in boxing range, Sedriques Youssef will have success. It's on the outside with the long range attacks, utilizing the kicks, that Edson Barboza has to really fluster Sedriques Youssef, and having questionable head kick defense to begin with, as evidenced in the Arnold Allen fight. Sedriques Youssef got hit with some shots too, got hit with another head kick and was on wobbly legs. And, I wasn't able to watch the fight live, but I watched it after the fact, just the highlights. And man, good for Edson Barboza. American Top Team on a roll. It's kind of just like everything I've been saying about American Top Team. Very, very hard gym to fade at the moment. I mean, they just have so many things going well for them between coaching staff and training partners and momentum within the octagon. So yeah, I'm excited to put that card behind us. It was a fine card for sure, but this is the card that we've been looking forward to, and with all the moving parts, it makes this card, even more so exciting.
Yeah, my cash score last week was not very good. The fact of I had 3 losing fighters in my cash score contest, with Simon Petrosky, who didn't score 1 point at all, and Adrian Yanez only got 8 points. But congratulations to Record 62 taking out the Fight HQ contest last week. Their lineup was Barboza, Michel Pereira, which I was definitely was wrong about that one there. Christian Rodriguez, we were both off on that one there, getting 90 points. Darren Elkins, which was the guy that I talked about. I thought that was one of the underdogs potentially target last week. Of course, Terrence McKinney just went out there and just destroyed Bren Marat, and Dixon also was in their lineup there. Congratulations there to Record 62 taking out the contest. Of course, as I mentioned, we got the contest already live up there. It's in the show notes if you haven't watched us live here on YouTube. If you're watching us live, hey, we appreciate you tuning in here on a Thursday afternoon. We wanted to get this show out a little bit earlier since it is an afternoon card or early morning card here. But Pete, as we start to look ahead to UFC 294 and talking about game theory and developing our DFS lineups, the thing that really stuck out to me when I was putting my spreadsheet together, and, of course, as we do this show, FanDuel salaries are not out. To me, it's about the amount of fighters that we have over 9,000 and the amount of fighters that we have. I mean, I put the number to 73 and below, but I think you could literally probably say 71 and below. That, to me, is kind of, as you're developing your lineups, that, to me, is where kind of the thought process starts.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a week to have plenty of good 9,000 options, and you have a wide array of options from Mokaev all the way down to Nathaniel Wood. You can make an argument for anybody within that range. There are some odds on this fight card that I'm just not in agreement with. So when I'm not in agreement with how the odds are constructed, it tends to make me go towards the value side, which is the underdogs that we'll get to in some of the fights. But I would definitely say that the majority of people are going to look to smash the 9,000 options and, paying high and low. So somewhat of a stars and scrubs approach. If you are looking at the slate from a value standpoint, you definitely hope that all the bottom end options just completely bust. Because if you avoid these 9,000 options, you will be on the outside looking in. Clearly Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski are going to be the chalk of the week because it is the 5-round bout and they aren't priced heavily at all. Makhachev is sitting there at 8,700, whereas Volkanovski's at 7,500. So, I mean, you have a $900 difference from Makhachev all the way up top to Mohammad Mokaev. Normally, the main event favorites are some of the highest priced options on the slate. Not this week. So, I'm definitely going to be, looking at the mid range because I feel like a lot of people are going to be constructing it with a stars and scrub approach. But I'm interested in some of these high priced options.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of some of these high price options, and like I would even throw Chimaev in that mix at 8,900 is to me, it's going to be about where does ownership go. That's going to play a really big key role of who in that 89 and up range just is not getting ownership. I would imagine a lot of those, and look, I'm with you. I think obviously the main event, there's going to be a lot of ownership there, and for people looking to save salary, I would imagine Volkanovski is going to be the key. We'll talk about this fight in a second. The stepping up on 11 days notice. He was 181 pounds when he took this fight. Something to kind of think about there. But like, look, I look at it's like, who is going to be that 6,000? Like, I just feel like, and Pete, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like one of these 6,000 fighters is going to end up optimal. I'm not saying they're necessarily going to win the fight, but they're just going to score enough points. I mean, you've talked about this game theory, I mean, for the last year or so of sitting there going, sometimes you can find that 6,000 option that can go 15 minutes, get you 40, maybe 50 points. And all of a sudden, now, I mean, when I was hand building a lineup earlier, because I did put one, I will say this right now, Tim Elliott will be in my cash score this week. And maybe I'm going to look absolutely stupid by doing that, but I'm just thinking that fight's going to go 15 minutes. And you talk about the betting salaries this week and the DFS salaries not really in agreement with. That is one of the fights I look at and go, it's way too wide.
Yeah, I mean, there's several fights that I can't wait to get to. It's just like what Mohammad Mokaev has been doing. When he burst onto the scene, he looked absolutely untouchable. And then he's kind of gotten away from his takedowns, at least the volume attempts that he had in the past. I mean, like, in his first fight against Cody Durden, big flying knee leads to a guillotine, quick fight, ends in 58 seconds. Against Charles Johnson, this is the volume I'm talking about. He attempted 26 takedowns against Charles Johnson. He landed 12 of them. He followed it up with 6 of 7 takedowns against Malcolm Gordon and 4 of 8 against Javid Filio. So, like, the volume is still great, but it's not what it was. I feel like his salary is reflective for his Charles Johnson performance, not necessarily the guy that's kind of been squeaking out almost decisions, like just about to go to the judges' scorecard, and then he picks up a 3rd-round victory over Malcolm Gordon at 4 minutes and 26 seconds into the 3rd round. Same thing against Rafael Filio, 4 minutes and 32 seconds into the 3rd round. If those go 15 minutes, who knows? Maybe the fight's a lot closer than what we perceive it to be. I actually think that he's kind of been just getting by on some of these rounds. But I mean, the ceiling is ridiculous for this guy. So it's hard to say. Tim Elliott creates a ton of scrambles and is a hell of a wrestler, but not the best jiu-jitsu practitioner. So perhaps it's not going to take a lot of takedowns from Mohammad Mokaev. We'll have to see.
Yeah, the question ultimately is going to be is there going to be a 9,000 option that goes in and gets upset this week, finding those right upsets. And, of course, as always, myself and Pete, we appreciate the questions that are coming in. Of course, if this is your first time watching us, what we're going to do is we're going to break down all the fights. Then we'll get into your listener questions, so you can fire those away. Also, I'll talk about some prize picks. I know one of the commenters last week wanted me to mention kind of the prize picks towards the end of the show. I'll still mention that during the fight, but I'll give a little bit of a recap when we get towards the end of the show. But Pete, let's get right into the main event. It is the rematch that came together on 11 days' notice. Alexander Volkanovski replacing Charles Oliveira, taking on Islam Makhachev. Of course, these guys fought back in February. And, of course, Islam, once again, no question, the betting favorite here, minus 240, plus 220 for Volkanovski. For Makhachev, he's 8,700 DK. 7,500 over there for Alexander Volkanovski. And, this, to me, one of the hard things about breaking down this fight, Pete, and I don't know if you kind of have the same theory, is it's just this whole 11-day notice for Volkanovski stepping in. He has to cut from 181 to 155 pounds. Of course, at being in Abu Dhabi, they get a little bit of extra time to recover here. But that, to me, is like, we always hear the cliche in the fight game. The guy who lost in the first matchup has the advantage going in the second matchup. I just don't know if that cliche fits for this matchup.
Yeah, it's not ideal circumstances, for Alexander Volkanovski, clearly. I mean, he's been dealing with some lingering injuries, one of them being an arm issue, and was going to take the rest of the year off and was basically going to come back at the beginning of next year. For whatever reason, he answered this call because I don't think that he could live with himself if he declined a rematch against the guy who beat him. So he's very hungry to avenge the loss for sure. But I do think that Islam Makhachev is clearly, top 3 pound for pound fighters in the world right now. What he can do to you, he can strike well enough. And then his wrestling is just so overpowering and his control time is just so great that he can win and bank rounds. I still think that he's susceptible getting finished the later the fight goes, no matter what. But against Alexander Volkanovski, who outside of his camp, you don't know how much he's been in the gym. You don't know how much he's been, training hard. Staying fit is fine, but being in fight camp is completely different. And clearly Volkanovski hasn't been in fight camp. That doesn't mean he can't go out there and knock out Islam Makhachev in rounds 1, 2, or 3. Especially if Makhachev has a terrible cut or, if he exerts too much energy early on. I did like what I saw from Alexander Volkanovski in the first one. I really did, because I do think in a full camp that he beats Islam Makhachev. I really do in a rematch with a full camp. I think that he can make the adjustments, spend the time with Craig Jones as needed. They've been mixing in some training with Bang Tao as well, like some of the instructors, the Hardwood brothers. So I don't know if this is the situation for him to win though, because Volkanovski is going to be significantly undersized and he's cutting a tremendous amount of weight, short notice, arm injuries. I think there's some things that Makhachev can do to really stifle the offense of Volkanovski, and it leads to utilizing his kicks from the outside. The front kicks were fine. The round kicks, I think, are automatic. Anytime that he wants to stay at that range, Islam Makhachev can throw those round kicks in. I actually feel like Volkanovski's somewhat susceptible to head kicks. He's somewhat susceptible to head kicks and knees up the middle. And that's something, if I'm a part of Islam Makhachev's camp, I'm thinking about a shorter guy. How do we, just hit him on the chin with something? And it's going to be a knee or it's going to be a kick. And then when he's thinking about that, about the striking, that's when we incorporate our grappling. So I really want Volkanovski to win. I'm going to be rooting like hell for Volkanovski to win. But I have this weird feeling that Makhachev kind of puts a stamp on this fight. Maybe he hurts Volkanovski on the feet with a knee or an uppercut to the shorter man. And then it leads to a submission finish. But yeah, I think that Makhachev at 8,700 is one of the best values. And Volkanovski is clearly one of the best underdogs, but definitely not in an ideal circumstance to go against the number one or number 2, arguably, pound for pound fighters in the world, and Islam Makhachev.
Yeah, I mean, that's, as you're talking there, I mean, that to me is also kind of goes to what we were talking about a little bit earlier when we were talking about game theory of looking at ownership and seeing where it is. Could we potentially get a little bit of a value on Islam? Just because I do think that a lot of people are going to look at Volkanovski as saving salaries. Of course, if you want to check out our friends over at Stochastic, they do have an offer for the Fight HQ listeners that is in the show notes if you want to check that out. When we look over at PrizePicks, so we got 4 props on Islam, 55.5 significant strikes, 22.5 fight time minutes, 3 takedowns, and a fantasy score of 105.5. The 2, Pete, that stick out to me is the fight time and the takedown. I would say takedown would be the preferred prop I would want to go in this matchup. I would want to go more than 3 takedowns. I based on kind of your breakdown, I would sense that you maybe are sensing less than 22 and a half fight time minutes, even though
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of in the thought, I don't know. I just think it goes 25 minutes again.
It's hard for a guy on short notice to go 25 minutes. If he's going to get put in bad positions. Like, I mean, like, say what you want. Volkanovski was in bad spots and he was in threatening situations. Like Islam had his back and he did fine with the defense for sure. I would just love another complete camp with Craig Jones and those guys. I think that could really work wonders, but on 11 days notice, it's not like he's in a favorable matchup stylistically. So, I think of those prize picks that you mentioned, I would probably say the fantasy score would be my favorite. I think that he's going to get well over that. I just have a feeling that Islam's going to do it, even though I'm clearly going to be rooting for Alexander Volkanovski here to pull off the upset and become the lightweight champion of the world.
If you're looking to play over our prize picks, they do have a free square on Steph Curry for Tuesday for the NBA regular season opener of a half point. Pretty sure
Can you believe that? Can you believe Chris Paul's on that team? It's ridiculous.
I will say this as someone who loves basketball, I am fascinated to see how that works in terms of how they kind of incorporate, the guards with the forwards, Draymond's got the injury. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting one and see when they get in crunch time, how do they run that lineup?
We just need to see CP3 just dish the ball. That's it. Just drive, dish, kick it out. Just use those assist skills, and you're not going to be relied upon offensively too much. And if you do, just drive to the basket. If you get, somebody steps up to you, kick it out, because the Warriors are going to be disgusting. They're going to be really, really dangerous.
I think he's a great insurance policy for Golden State. That's the way, in case Steph or Clay go down at some point. They've got a little bit of insurance policy. Of course, he's had also his injury situation. But yeah, man, I love basketball, so I'm looking forward to it. Let's move over to our co-main event. We got Khamzhat Chimaev, of course, initially supposed to take on Paulo Costa. Now takes on Kamaru Usman. Usman moving up to the 185-pound division. He's a plus 240 betting underdog. Khamzhat Chimaev minus 300. Over on DraftKings, Chimaev is 8,900. Usman is 7,300. Of course, yesterday, Pete, the Twitter world or the X world was all kind of whether Usman maybe got injured during the open workout. Yeah. Justin Gaethje saying no. And I'll say this, Pete, and we all know your love for Chimaev. And to me, in the fight game, someone like Chimaev, it's about taking the right fights at the right time. And that's why I look at this fight. I just think, look, Kamaru Usman, I mean, he hasn't fought a 3-round fight in years. But he's also, I mean, look, I don't want anybody in the Usman camp to take this the wrong way. He's on the back 9 of his career. He's 36 years old, moving up in weight. So to me, that's where I look at Khamzhat as like, this is the perfect fight at the right time.
Yeah, this game's about timing. And I think that Khamzhat Chimaev couldn't have timed it better. I mean, a couple years ago, the guy who fought Gilbert Burns, does he beat Kamaru Usman? I don't know. I don't know if I feel the same about the guy right now in 2023, the guy that had to take a hard lesson in that Gilbert Burns fight. His coach was screaming at him because he went out there and he fought with his ego and he didn't fight with his IQ or his best skill set, which is his grappling and his wrestling. He incorporated it a few times, but the danger of Gilbert Burns' submission skills is what kind of led him to keep it on the feet. And next thing you know, you stay on the feet with Gilbert Burns. He's really, really developed into a dangerous striker, has phenomenal power. Even he rocked Kamaru Usman before he got finished. I agree with you. That timing's everything. And I do think that, I'm going to be backing my boy Khamzhat Chimaev here. And as far as the main event and co-main event underdogs, you're talking about, some of the best pound-for-pound fighters on the planet. So why would you not take shots at Alexander Volkanovski, priced at 7,500? Why would you not take shots at Kamaru Usman at 7,300? You don't know how Chimaev is really going to handle this massive step up in competition against one of the best pound for pound and one of the best welterweights ever. So, this is at middleweight, and I like Chimaev a lot better at middleweight than I did at welterweight. But you just don't know. And again, not an ideal circumstance for Kamaru Usman to step up and face the big bad wolf and Khamzhat Chimaev on short notice with basically no camp, despite being in solid shape and being, living the lifestyle, as I'm sure Alexander Volkanovski's been living the lifestyle. If you are a true martial artist and a true professional, you're training year round, you're not waiting for fight camps, but it's different when you have to be in fight shape, going up against a stylistic nightmare in both of their, matchups. So Usman's phenomenal value at 7,300. In a 3-round fight, you could see Usman just bring back that ridiculous volume and pace that broke so many opponents throughout his reign and throughout his come up in the division. But I do think that Chimaev finishes Kamaru Usman. That's my hot take. I don't know if it's really that hot, but I think that Chimaev. My daughter's screaming in the background. I think Chimaev. You hear her? Yeah, she's having a good old time. She's probably eating lunch right now with my mom. I think Chimaev lands some dangerous strikes on the feet, and we've already seen Usman get rocked numerous times. So I think that Chimaev finishes Usman. And if he doesn't, I think the strength of Chimaev is clearly going to be on display. I'm just excited. It's a hell of a fight, but I'm picking Chimaev at 8,900. He's been an absolute DFS monster, and 124, 121, 126, 117, 100, 103. Goodness gracious, that's just ridiculous scoring for Chimaev, priced at 8,900. So I'll be backing him.
So a little bit of insight on this when you mentioned about Gilbert Burns. When Usman got the call, he was at Killcliff FC with Gilbert Burns last week when he got the call for this matchup. And, as I look over at PrizePicks, this is one of those ones that I don't know. The pure gut feeling here. I think this hits the third round, just a pure gut feeling on my part. But like hearing you talk, to me, it says you over at PrizePicks, we got 3 props on Khamzhat Chimaev, significant strikes 47.5, fight time 10, fantasy score 98.5. I gotta say that you're thinking that 98.5 is the prop to go at PrizePicks and going more than that.
Yeah, I think so. He hasn't had less than that to this point, but clearly this is the toughest opponent he's had. So will he rise to the occasion, or will the step up in competition really halter his output and halter his his success in the cage? We'll have to see. But I'm going to back my boy. I planted the flag on Chimaev years ago. Same thing with Tom Aspinall, and Romanov was a part of that bunch, but 2 for 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, it's Cardio and Romanov are exactly best buds. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I mean, he looked better in his past fight, I think, right? Didn't he come back and look pretty methodical and refined? But yeah, I definitely think the upside for Aspinall and Chimaev is clearly the highest of anybody I planted my flag on.
Well, it was reported last week that the winner of this matchup is going to get Sean Strickland as long as they're healthy. Of course, Izzy was on the Rock podcast last week, talking about how he's going to take some time off. We'll see how long he's on the sidelines. And I feel like we're probably talking about Khamzhat Chimaev as a UFC middleweight champion 6 months from now. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, though, how these guys cross-train. And then, I've seen videos of Strickland talking to Chimaev and saying, Chimaev, chill out, dude. You're beating everybody up. You're better than everybody. Like,
did you see,
slow your roll a little bit.
Did you see who Strickland has done some sparring with?
Who?
Max Crosby of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, God.
Crosby did a lot. He says, yeah, we beat the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
It's unreal. I'm pretty sure that Sean Strickland would. He has no problem going up against anybody there. Let's move over to the next matchup and a key matchup in the 205-pound division. Of course, both these guys will be right there, potentially in line. Of course, one side more than the other. You got Magomed Ankalaev taking on Johnny Walker. Ankalaev is a -350 betting favorite. Plus 275 for Johnny Walker on DK. Ankalaev 9,100. Walker 7,100. And people, when you look at some of these, these 7,000 options, to me, like I put like Johnny Walker and the next fight we're going to talk about with Warlley ALves, I put them both kind of the same situation. They're probably live for about 3 minutes, but if it gets past that, you're not going to feel very good.
I kind of push back on that, and the reason I'll push back on that is just because like Johnny Walker is somebody who I've constantly I've underestimated. And he's on a 3-fight win streak. I mean, he beat Ion Cutelaba, Paul Craig, and Anthony Smith. And Paul Craig and Ion Cutelaba was, in the first round. We know he's dangerous in the first round, but like he went the distance with Anthony Smith. He went the distance 25 minutes with Thiago Santos in a very, very lackluster fight. Nikita Krylov went the distance, 15 minutes. So like we're starting to see a little bit more patient and refined Johnny Walker. And like Ankalaev is a guy who's, in my opinion, somewhat boring and very patient. So he's not going to risk too much because he's worried about, losing his spot in the ranking or, making a mistake and getting finished, kind of like how he did in his debut against Paul Craig. Still scored 51, but like I feel like that fight shaped the rest of his career, and it's kind of been a little. He'll answer combinations. So if you start out aggressive, he's going to counter you all day long, but he's not the one to really push the pace too much. He doesn't want to push the pace too much and possibly put himself in a bad spot. So I will award him with great fight IQ, but that fight IQ borderlines with being a little bit too patient and boring. So yeah, if you look at his DFS scoring, he hasn't really been the best. So priced at 9,100, he's a fighter that a lot of people feel safe and have championship aspirations for, but like scored 118 against Ion Cutelaba twice and then 104 against Marcin Practio. And then besides that, like in his other fights, it's just like, I don't know, in his other 10 fights, he hasn't broken 100 points. So this is a weird contrarian call, but I feel like this fight will not be optimal. If you think it's optimal, I think clearly you think that Walker gets KO'd badly, a guy who has a horrible chin. And if you watch his knockout defeats, he gets knocked out in weird ways. But I think that his momentum is going to make Ankalaev respect him a little bit. So I think this is going to go the distance, or if it doesn't go the distance, I think it's going to go late, a lot later than people are anticipating. And I'm willing to bet that there's going to be a ton of ownership surrounding this fight, and this might be my way to slightly get different. I think Ankalaev wins a decision, maybe gets hurt on the feet, resorts to that wrestling to really just keep Johnny Walker on the ground, and hopefully he doesn't lose to something stupid, because Johnny Walker beats everybody with silly ways, hammer fists and just like very sloppy, unorthodox techniques, but it works for him. So I'm not hating on him at all. So I'll be taking Ankalaev to win via decision. But I think his outcome's probably going to be in the 90 point range.
This is where I think me and Pete differ a little bit on this. And I mean, look, it's, to me, Ankalaev, you got to watch out for those bombs that are going to come early from Johnny Walker. I think he's got a massive advantage here in the grappling aspect, where I think he could rack up some points. I think this fight's going to be over within 2 rounds. That's just me. That's why over on PrizePicks, I like the less than 10-minute fight time on Ankalaev. I like the more than 93.5 fantasy score. I will say this, over on PrizePicks, I'm not really in love with the significant strike props this week. So to me, it's going to be about attacking the fight time, the takedowns, and also the fantasy score over there. But to Ankalaev, he gets a win here. He puts himself right there in that conversation of who is going to take on the winner of Alex and Yuri. Jamal Hill, we'll see how he comes back from the injury. He would probably most likely be the guy that gets that shot, but Ankalaev is going to be right there. Next up, we got another 90,000 fighter, and that's Aliskerov, 9,500. He's a minus 600 betting favorite. ALves plus 430, 6,700 on DK. And I just mentioned as we were breaking down the previous fight there, Pete, like I look at Warlley Alves as, he's got that potential quick, 2-3 minute finishing ability, but like if he gets past that, I just don't think he can get the job done.
Yeah, Warlley Alves is a guy who is very dangerous and aggressive striking. If you're not a good striker or you're intimidated by pressure, he can break you. But if you're able to answer that pressure with your own and kind of push back on him, you can break him. And you can break him with pace, and you can definitely knock him out and finish him, or you can submit him. So I think that Warlley Alves, his best days are somewhat done for facing up-and-comers. I think that he can be a gatekeeper for sure, but, he did get knocked out against Jeremiah Wells, got knocked out against James Krause, largely due to fatigue, submitted against Randy Brown. All those fighters are really good fighters. And guess what? Ikram Aliskerov is a hell of a fighter too. He's priced at 9,500. Very intelligent fighter, good grappler, solid striker. The striking was on display against Phil Hawes. Landed a beautiful jab cross, and that right cross just planted Phil Hawes, knocked him out cold. in 2 minutes and 10 seconds in the first round, scored 108. 108 probably is not going to do it at 9,500. Obviously, I can't project what his score is going to be, but like I think that he's a safe play. I think that he's a safe play to win the bout this weekend. It's a old school UFC matchmaking of take the vet, put him up against the prospect who has history with Khamzhat Chimaev, and let's see what he can do. And I think Aliskerov's going to pass the test, whether it comes in the first or second round. I think that he finishes Warlley ALves, and if for some reason it touches the third, I know that I'm favoring Aliskerov over Warlley ALves, who's been somewhat of a cardio liability at times. So I think he needs to be careful early, clearly, and maybe he wrestles early and early often. But after that, I think he can do whatever he wants to Warlley ALves. So at 9,500, I think is an excellent candidate to make your player pool. And I do like him a lot more than some of these other 9,000 options that I think have capped ceilings that we'll get to. But I'll just say, just right off the bat, I like Aliskerov's ceiling a lot more than Javid Basharat and Anshul Jubli.
Yeah, I'm with you on both that. You look over PrizePicks. PrizePicks think that this fight's going to be over fairly soon. The significant strike prop is 25.5. Fight time minutes 5 and 118.5 fantasy score. In terms of that, I mean, it's not really props I really love in terms of this one. I mean, I don't really see myself attacking this one on PrizePicks. I will say this one thing, and I did it last week, and it didn't work out in my favor because Caleb Williams didn't, throw the football around against Notre Dame. Is if you like, say 2 or 3 props in MMA, pairing those up with some college football props or NFL props, you like something on NFL, can be really an easy path to getting if you're looking to play those 5 and 6 player cards. It's a little bit of game theory in terms of playing over there on PrizePicks. Next up, we got Nurmagomedov taking on Gafurov. Gafurov a plus 180 betting underdog, minus 220 for Nurmagomedov. He's 800 on DK. Gafurov is 7,400. Pete.
Yeah, I mean, Muin Gafurov losing to John Castaneda. I don't think Castaneda is bad. I think people hate on Castaneda because he was broken at one time. But like Gafurov attempted takedowns and to no avail, just wasn't able to succeed in any of them. Threw 157 significant strikes, barely landed a third. Had a minute and 55 seconds of control time against John Castaneda, who's a solid grappler. But I think that Said Nurmagomedov is like the real deal. I think that he's so good. And this is a guy whose previous loss to Jonathan Martinez doesn't look that bad. When you see Martinez go out there and just completely dismantle Adrian Yanez, a guy that, Yanez, we've been pretty high on, collectively, just thinking about his boxing skill set. His hands are great. How would he deal with the kicks? Well, not well. He didn't deal with those kicks well at all. And, to go the distance with Jonathan Martinez, I never thought I'd say this, but the development of Jonathan Martinez and how he's a legitimate force within the bantamweight division is kind of crazy. But Said Nurmagomedov had 52 fantasy points in that. It was a close fight. I mean, he had 3 of 9 takedowns, and he's not known for his takedowns. He's known for his striking. But guess what? In that matchup against Jonathan Martinez, he said, screw this. I am going to look to my takedowns. So he had 4 minutes and 20 seconds of control time. With all that being said, I think that the win over Said Yokob Kakramanov is what really sticks out to me because I was pretty big on Said Yokob. I think that his wrestling's fantastic. The pace is fantastic. And guess what? Nurmagomedov just did not give up on his submission attempts. So I think that he gets Muin Gafurov out of there. And if he doesn't, I think it's one-way traffic for 15 minutes. So Gafurov's just not a guy that I'm about this week. I don't know if you feel the same or if you differ than me, but Said Nurmagomedov is a solid fighter to win the fight. Historically, he's not the best fantasy guy. I mean, 52, 76, 59. 117 is nice over Cody Stamen. 122 against Mark Striegel is nice. 106 against Ricardo Ramos, that's perfectly fine. But like 68 over Justin Scoggins. So I don't know. I'll probably get to Nurmagomedov, but I really like some other cheaper fighters that I'm going to get to a little bit more.
Yeah, I would much rather get to Saeed Nurmagomedov in this one. I mean, in terms of trying to get to someone, one of these underdogs, Gafurov is not one of those guys. Over on PrizePicks, I'm not big on any of these props. Nurmagomedov, significant strikes, 40.5, fight time, 12.5, and a 92.5 fantasy score. And you just kind of mentioned about his fantasy score, so that's something I kind of stick there. Next up, we got Tim Elliott taking on Mohammad Mokaev. Mokaev, a minus 450 betting favorite, plus 350 for Tim Elliott. Tim Elliott, 6,600 on DK. And for Mohammad Mokaev, he is 9,600. And this is just one of those fights that I think the price is inflated, Pete. I have no problem with Mokaev being the favorite. No problem at all. And he may very well go out there and just wreck Tim Elliott. But to me, the price point to me is way too high. And that's why, like, when I'm talking about a cash core and finding someone to give me some salary relief, Tim Elliott is my guy this week that I'm going to in cash.
I'm not against that. I think it's okay. I'll tell you what, my career record with Tim Elliott's got to be horrible. I wish I knew. I wish I knew what it was because I constantly just underestimate this guy. I really do. He's so funky and weird. And I think the one performance that completely made me like say I'm not going back to that well was the Brandon Royval fight. Because like Royval is a guy that I thought is just super dynamic and dangerous and more of a submission threat than anything. And, Tim Elliott went out there and ragdolled him for a little bit. And then I was on the Tim Elliott side. And then I just saw submission attempt after submission attempt. And eventually when he was put on his back and he was put in a bad situation, I just saw Tim Elliott break. And this has always been a guy who's battled personal issues as well. We all have our personal demons and dealing with stuff. But ever since that fight, I mean, he's 4-1. And I got to tell you, I don't know if I've picked him many times. And he's just been on a tear. 76 against Ryan Benoit, 97 against Jordan Espinoza, 44 against Mateusz Nicolau, 95 against Tagir Ulanbekov, and most recently 116 against Victor Altamirano. Solid competition, but nothing spectacular. But this is a guy I constantly just kind of gloss over and underrate. So I see on paper why you're backing him. I do think stylistically, like he can make things tricky for Mokaev, who kind of screws around and plays with his food a little bit. Just talked about how Mokaev struggled to really put a stamp on some of these rounds and just, barely getting by on some of them. And sometimes judges will weigh activity a little bit more. And Tim Elliott's clearly going to be the more active guy. So my worry is that Elliott just, incorporates heavy volume striking, maybe mixes in some takedowns to put stamps on rounds, and then you see Mokaev just maybe land one takedown and submits him. But as far as cash core, I'm not against it. I still think that Mokaev has some of the best upside on the slate, given what his history is and the scrambling ability and stand-up ability of Tim Elliott to get back to his feet to boost the totals of Mohammad Mokaev. I think at 9,600 makes sense. But again, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. I might fly in the mid range this week where everybody's going stars and scrubs. I'm just gonna try to be a little bit different.
Yeah, when I look over PrizePicks, I really do like the Mokaev more than 3 takedowns, and it's that scrambling ability of Tim Elliott to get taken down, but then get right back up. Like I would say that might be where I start my PrizePicks cards at, is the more than 3 takedowns on Mokaev. Significant strikes, 28.5. What scares me about that number is if all these strikes are on the ground and they're not counted as significant strikes, it might be hard to get to that number. And the 90.5 fantasy score, like if you like Mokaev to win this fight, I feel like that's one that you're probably going to be looking at more. But to me, if you're playing a Mokaev prop over in PrizePicks, it's got to be the takedown prop.
Yeah, exactly. I think the takedown prop any week that he fights needs to be circled, and you need to get exposure to it. I just probably Tim Elliott fights are weird, so I try to just pivot away from his fight a little bit because I never know what to expect.
Yeah, you never know there. Next up, let's move over. We got Mohammad Yayha taking on Trevor Peek. Peek is the minus 155 betting favorite, plus 130 for Yayha. Yayha is 8,000. Peek is 8,200. And Pete, this is like one of my sneaky fights of a potential fight of the night here, just because I think these two guys are going to go out there and bang.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Muhammad Yayha guy, but I tell you what, I'm definitely not the biggest Trevor Peek guy at all. I've been hating on this guy because I'm a technician in a way, and when I coach and I train my guys and girls, I'm all about fundamentals and technique. And this is a guy, Trevor Peek, who fights like an amateur, but his aggression and his combination skills are great. And what he does is he's able to just put things together, and the pressure. And he could take a shot too. So I mean, I'm going to give him his flowers. He can take a hell of a shot. And he's dangerous. Even in his previous matchup when he got ragdolled against Chepe Mariscal, up until the final minute, he's out there throwing bombs. See, the guy doesn't know how to throw a jab or take his time. Everything's with bad intentions. So like,
Yeah.
I liked what I saw, whereas the cardio was always a question for me. Like, what happens when he's completely overexerted? Does he quit? I didn't say that he quit. I think that he was exposed to be a one-dimensional fighter. But he got back to his feet really well. He defended 8 takedowns, but he didn't get controlled for as much as he should have, because Chepe Mariscal hit him with some gorgeous takedowns. And he kept getting back to his feet and making it a fight. So like 8,200, I really like what I see. Up against future wrestlers, I think Trevor Peek is clearly a bust candidate. But in a matchup against Muhammad Yayha, who I watched in his previous fights get taken down and controlled, doesn't look like he has great wrestling. Looks like he wants to stand and strike. So this is going to be fireworks. And I've seen Muhammad Yayha take some shots and get dropped with some wide shots behind the ear. I think that Muhammad Yayha is going to engage in a firefight. Maybe he looks to wrestle. That's how everybody should look to beat Trevor Peek. But if you wrestle and you have poor control, you're gonna, he's gonna stand back up and he's gonna hit you with his standing hammer fists and his wild rangy hooks. So yeah, I mean, with all that being said, you guys know how I hate brawlers, but I'm gonna pick Trevor Peek in this matchup. I am. I think he finds the chin of Muhammad Yayha, and I think he's gonna knock him out.
Yeah, I'm with you there on Trevor Peek here. I mean, this is a fight that if you look at the betting odds, the under 1.5 is a little bit juiced here. That's why over on PrizePicks, I do like the less than 6.5 fight time minutes for Trevor Peek. That's the one I love the most. The second one, I would say more than 85.5 fantasy score, and the 30.5 significant strike prop. I just think you're playing with fire there.
Yeah.
But this is Trevor Peek. By the way, for the people who watched the Contender Series last week, Torres Finney is actually one of his training partners there in Tennessee. So,
Yes.
So he's been in the room with the guy, and I mean, look, Trevor Peek is one of those guys that, I mean, look, is he ever going to be top 15? Unlikely, but to me, he's just one of those guys that I can see sticking around the UFC for a very long time, because the UFC just goes, you know what, this is a guy we can put on the prelims, and we just got to put him in the right matchup. And the guy just wants to, he, as I like to say, Pete, he wants to throw them bungalows. He ain't about shoot that double leg. No, he's there to throw some hands.
Yeah, he is. And sometimes these fighters have a lot more promise and success than you anticipate. I mean, look what Mark Hunt, who is a hell of a K1 kickboxer. So I'm not trying to relate Mark Hunt to Trevor Peek, but in a division where when you are one-dimensional, you didn't really think that he was going to have all that success. And Mark Hunt just went on a run. He's, one shot knocking out people and stepping away. And Trevor Peek can, in the specific matchups, he can definitely have, start making some moves up the division. Absolutely. And if he's, I was happy to dive in to see who he trains with, because that's also part of the reason why, I like Chepe Mariscal, better camp. But now seeing what Torres Finney is capable of on the Contender Series, it kind of was okay, that's a good guy to be training with. Mm-hmm. That's a fine, solid guy. You don't need notable names, but I need to know who the hell you're training with. It can't just be nobody. So, it's Trevor Peek for me. Despite the regional success of Muhammad Yayha, I think that Peek is just going to find the chin.
One thing I do want to mention before we move on to the next fight, I got a press release earlier this week from my friends over at RueBet.fun. They do some stuff with some UFC fighters, Brandon Moreno, Charles Oliveira. They actually they're launching the Rue's $1 million perfect parlay for UFC 294. If you use your test here, as they're giving fans a pick'em game, offering an opportunity to win $1 million with Rue's $1 million perfect parlay, a free to play pick'em contest for UFC 294. To win this $1 million $20 perfect parlay prize. They must correctly guess 10 questions about the outcomes of UFC 294.
Oh,
I logged in, I signed up, I started looking at this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a shot at it. I mean, hey, look, let's just be honest about it. The odds of hitting 10 outcomes of UFC 294, like
10 outcomes, like
yes.
Specific, like decision, knockout, submission.
Yes.
Shoot,
that's hard.
It's a lottery ticket right there. Is what that
exactly. It's a lottery ticket. Yeah. Yes. But I know one of the guys over there, so I thought I would mention that out there to our listeners. Cool. Next up, we got Javid Basharat taking on Victor Henry. Basharat is a minus 600 betting favorite, plus 430 for Victor Henry. Henry 6,800 on DK and 9,400 on Basharat. Of course, for people who are listening a little bit earlier here on the live version of the show, you talked about Basharat's one of those guys you're just not in love with, and it's a price point situation.
No, yeah, man. What the hell are these odds? Like, I don't get these odds. Minus 600 for Javid Basharat. Yeah, he's fantastic. He's awesome. He's amazing. But his 3 fights in the UFC has been Trevor Jones, super easy opponent despite the dangerous hands. Tony Gravely, okay, solid fighter. Mateus Mendonça just lost to the guy I can't stand, Nate Maness. So like, how do we hold Javid Basharat? Like, to what regard? Like, okay, he's good. B+, A- for the division, no problem at all. 65 fantasy points, 82 fantasy points, 98 fantasy points. Priced at 9,400, you're expecting him to be in there against a bum. Guess what? Victor Henry's not a bum at all. At all. Okay? He's the guy that spoiled the fight against Raoni Barcelos. Stepped up. Outstruck him. Threw 352 significant strikes. Landed 181. Defended 6 takedowns. So, in his next fight, I was picking him against Rafael Assunção. And guess what? He laid an egg. 126 significant strikes, 55 landed. 0-1 takedowns and only 3 takedowns defended. Not really sure what Victor Henry showed up that night, but then he just most recently has a victory over Tony Gravely, who has been up and down in the UFC. Very well-rounded fighter, solid striking, better wrestling than anything. Threw 244 significant strikes, landed 154, defended 14 takedowns. I think for the most part, this is going to be an interesting back and forth affair on the feet with Basharat and Victor Henry trading calf kicks. My daughter's still just having a good old time. Basharat is very well rounded. He's going to mix in takedowns and control time. And I think his submission skills are some of the most underappreciated assets of his game. 2 of 4 takedowns against Tony Gravely, 3 of 5 against Mateus Mendonça. He can defend takedowns too if you're trying to take him down. 11 takedowns defended, 9 takedowns defended. This seems like a really close fight. And if it's not, I still don't justify the minus 600 price tag. So naturally, what's that going to do is going to make Victor Henry, in my opinion, be one of the best values on the slate. He can win a decision. Basharat, despite his regional finishing success, he hasn't been able to find a finish over Trevor Jones, Tony Gravely, or Mateus Mendonça. I don't see him finishing Victor Henry. So where's the upside here? I think it's a 15-minute decision that could possibly swing one way or another. I'm still picking Javid Basharat to win the fight, but I'm just telling you that me personally, I'd much rather have Victor Henry than Tim Elliott. And perhaps that's a hot take. That's kind of how I'm feeling.
And then that very well could be a great ownership play in terms of leverage of probably Tim Elliott going to be more popular as a pump play over on PrizePicks. Basharat 75.5 significant strikes, 2.5 takedowns, 107.5. That takedown prop is probably the one that sticks out to me the most, but it's not one of the props over on PrizePicks. As I look at my spreadsheet, I don't know if you're like me, I color code my spreadsheet. So on Saturday, so I'm kind of figuring everything going out there. This is not a fight that I have color coded a little bit. I will say the next one is a little bit of a color code when it comes to PrizePicks. That's Abu Azaitar taking on Sedriques Dumas. Dumas is a minus 225 betting favorite, plus 185 for Azaitar. Azaitar 7,800 on DK, 8,400 for Dumas. And Pete, this is one of those fights like you talk. Color coding fights. Like, to me, if I'm color coding GPP fights, I think this is a GPP fight.
Yeah, it's a GPP fight because I don't trust either one of these fighters. I mean, Sedriques Dumas is a guy on the Contender Series who looks dangerous. I mean, he's tall. He's a long, rangy guy for the middleweight division. On the outside, he's gonna frustrate a lot of opponents with his broomstick straight punches. Like he'll hit you from a mile away. He can throw good kicks. I think that he has sneaky head and arm finishes. So like he has a good front headlock series, very good guillotines. And I do think like him losing to Josh Fremd how he did, it was a nice lesson. Josh Fremd's very, very talented. But rebounding against Cody Brundage, a guy who pulls guillotine 24/7, it was good. It was good to see some development. He was able to reverse out of some positions, maintain top control, went the distance, had 11 minutes of control time by just getting out of guillotines and then just kind of playing the top game against a solid wrestler in Cody Brundage. So like Abu Azaitar is a guy I'm just not sold on. I'll tell you my beef with him. He keeps his head down and he throws everything loopy and blind. He throws everything without seeing his opponent, doesn't keep his vision on the chest of his opponent. He's staring at the floor, he's closing his eyes, he's bobbing his head. He has a lot of tendencies. I'm telling you right now, Sedriques Dumas, if I'm his coach, I'm throwing a knee or a left head kick because I see in footage he dips his head constantly, throws, dips, throws, dips. He's going to walk into either a head kick or a knee, and I think Sedriques Dumas, whether he finishes him with that or not, I think he's going to really give problems to Abu Azaitar, who's just a brawler. And I don't think that Abu's like some amazing grappler. He's one of one in the takedown department against Vitor Miranda. And then previously against Marc-Andre Barriault, went to 0 of 3 in the takedown department, threw a hell of a lot, and gassed himself out against Marc-Andre Barriault. 219, landed 108. So, like, scored 53. Yeah, because he pushed the pace and broke himself. But I think Sedriques Dumas is going to break him inside of one round. And in the mid-range, I absolutely love it. Despite my untrustworthiness attached to Sedriques Dumas, I think this is a very good stylistic fight for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is one of those, like, I can see myself in a decent amount of GPP lineups pairing up Dumas and Trevor Peak together, you know, in that mid-range of the 8,000 there. And, I mentioned about color coding over on PrizePicks. The one I have color coded on this one is the 8.5 fight time minutes. I like the under there. I think I'm with you. To me, if Azaitar is going to go out there and get the win, I think he gets it within 3 minutes. And if he doesn't get within 3 minutes, that's where I think Dumas takes over. The significant strike prop on Dumas, 33.5. Fantasy score, 88.5. I would rank that as fight time would be my number one play over here. Number two would be that fantasy score Dumas more than 88.5. The 33.5, like, if you're going to play anything, it would be going the under there in terms of that one. Next up, we got Mike Breeden taking on Jubli. Jubli is a 3-1 betting favorite here, plus 240 for Breeden, 9,300 for Jubli on DK, 6,900 for Mike Breeden. And you know what? As I was hand building some lineups this morning, I was looking at Mike Breeden. I was sitting there going, like, I'm looking at. When I'm hand building these lineups, I'm thinking, okay, who is that low end guy? And like, I was looking at Breeden, I'm looking at Tim Elliott. You made a great point of talking about Victor Henry, but like, I don't know, man. Like, Breeden has, he hasn't treated me well in DFS since he's coming to the UFC, but like, it's just one of these fights. His name keeps popping off the screen at me.
All right, you ready? So I said that from a punt standpoint, I like Victor Henry better than I like Tim Elliott. And I think the masses will flock to Tim Elliott because of the pace and the flyweight division. But as far as like actual fights and odds, I couldn't agree less with these odds. I mean, 3.5 to 1, Anshul Jubli, 9,300 over Mike Breeden. Why? Because he, beat Jeka Saragi? Okay. Like, he's a solid striker. He throws good straight punches. It was his wrestling that won him that fight against Jeka Saragi, where he, finished him in the second round. No problem at all. 7 minutes of control time. He looked damn good. But I'll tell you what, I'm not sold. And I believe that Mike Breeden, to this point, has not shown us his full potential. Mm-hmm. And I just don't. I don't rate a quick loss to Terrence McKinney that bad. I just don't. I mean, look at Matt Frevola. If I thought that everybody who lost to Terrence McKinney was a bum, then I wouldn't think anything of Matt Frevola, and I wouldn't have picked him against Drew Dober. But like, I think Mike Breeden, it takes him a little time to get into the fight. And that was evidenced in the Natan Levy fight, where Natan's very dangerous, and Natan will incorporate takedowns, but it's his kicks that make him so dangerous. When he doesn't finish you, he goes to his wrestling a lot. And I think something that's underappreciated about Mike Breeden is his grappling. He's a solid BJJ brown belt. Defended 7 takedowns against Natan Levy, scored 3 of 4 of his own. And it's his boxing. His boxing is what really will win him fights. Threw 210 significant strikes, landed 104. In a loss to Natan Levy, scored 62. Yeah, he debuted on short notice and got knocked out against Alexander Hernandez. Hernandez did that to Beneil Dariush when he broke onto the scene. So, again, you can't play MMA math. But what I will say is that against international talent, there tends to be a wrestling advantage or grappling advantage for the guys that are stateside. And I do think that Mike Breeden is in a spot where maybe he doesn't offensively wrestle, but maybe he defensively wrestles and then is allowed to, let his hands free and let him go. So I like him here. I'm picking Mike Breeden to pull off the upset against Anshul Jubli, who's priced at a 3.5 to 1 favorite. I just don't get it. I don't think that Jekka Saragi is on the same level of Mike Breeden. And I know that Mike Breeden's 0-3 in the UFC. So I'm okay with looking silly, but when you take an aggressive approach on a 6,000 fighter and then you hit on them, the rest of your lineup, if you allocate your ownerships correctly, I think in your exposures, I think that you're going to be set up pretty well. So even if it's in a loss, let's say Mike Breeden loses a 15-minute decision, he's already shown once that he has good volume in a loss, 62 to Natan Levy. That's better than some people's wins half the time. So I'll be picking Mike Breeden to pull off the upset here, straight up. I'm picking him to beat Anshul Jubli.
I always feel much better when I have these, general, gut feelings, and my guy Pete comes in here and I'm like, okay, all right, I guess at least I'm not on an island here.
No, but and I'm not going to 150 max it. I'm going to just if you are 150 max, then those 3 6,000 fighters we talked about need to be prioritized. They need to be.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say here is, and like you mentioned, what Breeden's UFC record is, and we saw, look, every Tuesday the UFC has that matchmaker meeting. This is when fighters start getting released, and there's I want to say it's 11 fighters were released. Jennifer Maia, she fought out her contract, so she's looking to test free agency. I don't know where she thinks she's going to get big money from. I think she's probably just stuck with whatever the UFC wants to offer.
Yeah. Bellator's gone. You ain't signing her. So.
Yeah.
That would have been the only thing is that, a Bellator signing, but who knows what the hell's going on with that.
Look, it's, as I was having a conversation on a podcast yesterday, I was like, this whole Bellator PFL acquisition, which I do expect it to ultimately come together, is, while as a combat sports fan, I think it's going to be great because we're going to get some matchups that we couldn't get before. But I think from a fighter's aspect, I don't think it's great that you're essentially going to have only 2 places to go to. And, there's as I was talking to a manager last week, and they agree with me that there's a lot of fighters on that Bellator roster that we're going to start seeing back on the regional scene because there's not enough fights out there for them.
It sucks. That's when if one ever came over stateside, which obviously that's like asking something crazy, I think that they have the potential to become possibly the number 2. But you know what I mean? Like it really sucks. It really sucked that there's nowhere to go. And these regional MMA, it's like we went back 20 years where there's no money. You know what I mean?
By the way, people follow my guy Pete on social media. You saw a little post this week.
Oh, you sure did. You sure did. Guess what? Your boy is back in the cage. January 6th. Is that the right date? I think it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Unfortunately, I cannot be there because the Bucks have a game the next day. So I cannot be there that day. But when you send me that, I'll be like, "Hey Pete, what's that code so you get credit for that internet sell?" I'm hopping on that train. Can't be there in spirit, but I can be there in front of a computer monitor.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you what though, it's really cool to be back in there. Been training for it, for a long time, and tired of waiting. Tired of waiting, and waiting for Bellator to come back in my hometown. Who knows if that'll ever happen? But also just got to get back under the lights and start, getting back to doing what I'm supposed to do. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll have a match very soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited.
And look, I'm just saying, for our listeners out there that may want to come to Connecticut and watch Pete, wait till Pete tells you what that code is, so Pete gets that credit for selling that ticket.
Please, please don't go buying tickets right now. Relax, and hook your boy up, because this is regional MMA. You know what I mean? This is not Bellator.
That is the business of regional MMA. That's why I always say support your local fighters by buying tickets through them, because that is ultimately what benefits them. Because there are some fighters locally that I know they know how to push tickets, and let's just say they get a good commission rate.
I wonder. It's always like gut wrenching when like somebody's so excited to tell you that they're coming to your fight. I'm like, yeah, you bought tickets for me? Oh no, we get them free. We get this and that. And I'm like, I don't want to, upset them, but at the same time, I'm like, damn, that's how I make money, and that's how I feed my family. But I'm happy you're coming. So like, I don't know how to react. You know what I mean? So yeah, I got T-shirts,
Yeah. I'll be sitting there on a computer monitor going, come on, Pete, why are you shooting for a takedown? Come on.
No, that's not that.
Yeah, Pete will just lie to me what his game plan is and do that exact opposite. We've been there, done it. Let's move over to our next matchup. We got Nathaniel Wood, who is a -340 betting favorite, 9,000 on DK, taking on Mohammad Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov plus 270. He is 7,200 over there. And of course, we've seen Nathaniel Wood since moving up to 45, where he wasn't just cutting so much of a massive weight, and I remember when he made that move, I think I forget who the first fight was against at 145, but I remember it was like, is he going to be big enough? And well, he's shown he is.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though, I've been one of the biggest Nathaniel Wood fans, and some bias attached to it because I know Nathaniel Wood's striking coach. So we've been friendly through social media for years and years and years. I'm talking like 7 years. I think that Nathaniel Wood has some of the sneakiest upside, a part of that 9,000, that 9,000 scene. If you look, he's on 5 fights in a row where it's gone the distance, but that doesn't mean he can't score well. He scored 108, which is fine, but listen to who he's fought: Charles Jourdain, Andre Fili, Charles Rosa, John Castaneda, Casey Kenny. Now you're giving him Muhammad Naimov. I think that Muhammad Naimov is fine, but I think that Muhammad Naimov, he is what he is. He's okay defensively. Will panic shoot. Will gas as a fight goes on. Has good power. And Jamie Malarkey has really dropped down a lot on my personal rankings, and also just because of his fight IQ. Like, he needs to wrestle more. I know he likes to strike, but like, he's been knocked out and hurt countless times, and he was winning that fight. So for Muhammad Naimov to just kind of land the shot and knock him out, it's a good win. 91. He was priced at 6,500, broke the slate. I think that Nathaniel Wood has some of the sneakiest upside, and I am going to get a lot of exposure to him because I feel like everybody likes Mokaev, Aliskerov, Dudikova, Ankalaev, and maybe even Jubli more than him. So he could be lost in the shuffle. So, and you have Khamzhat Chimaev at 8,900. I just like Nathaniel Wood to outbox him. We've seen Nathaniel Wood take and absorb big damaging strikes in the past and get dropped. So I don't like, his striking defense at times, but I like his activity, and I like his well-rounded skill sets to completely dismantle and confuse Muhammad Naimov. So hopefully he avoids that power, but I'm going Nathaniel Wood, 9,000.
That to me is also, you talk about, comparing Wood to Chimaev. And that to me becomes as what's the difference in ownership between those two guys? Could we potentially get leverage by going with someone fighting very early on the card,
Yep.
where, if you're in these bigger GPP contests where you have people that are just looking at those main event, co-main event, maybe find a little bit of leverage. In terms of that, overall prize picks, 87.5 significant strikes prop for Wood, 105.5. In terms of fantasy score, not really either one of my favorites this week. I feel like if you're playing the Wood, the significant strike, 87.5, I think you sweat it out regardless. I don't care which side of the way you play on it. You're probably going to sweat it out just because of the volume they do have there. You mentioned about Dudakova. She's a minus 550 betting favorite taking on Frey, who's a 4-1 betting underdog. Frey, 7,000. Dudakova is 9,200. And, man, this is one of those ones that I looked at the betting lines and the DFS salaries, Pete, and I was like, God damn. Ugh.
I like her, though. I'll tell you what, I do like Dudakova a lot. I think it's clearly UFC old school matchmaking of Dudakova is the young fighter, the prospect against the vet who's lost a step and lost a significant step. Jin Yu Frey's 2-5 in the UFC. Arguably could have had some decisions go her way, but like the killer instinct is just non-existent. I just don't see her going out there and trying to hunt a finish. She just doesn't do it. She doesn't hunt submissions like, you would think, having her husband or boyfriend, I think it's her husband, be a big part of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. You would think that she would go out there and hunt submission finishes because she's so eager to, engage in the grappling. And we've seen, like, she'll go 3 of 7 in the takedowns, 2 of 3. I don't know, man. I'm out on Jin Yu Frey. I've been betting on her as an underdog for several times, and I just can't do it no more. Even as a favorite, she just didn't do well against Vanessa Demopoulos. So I am going to say that Dudakova clearly will win 2 rounds. The issue I have with Dudakova is the sacrificial throws and the low fight IQ and low percentage techniques that she will hunt, often putting herself in bad spots. She throws great haragoshis. She throws great trips. She will even upper body wrestle pretty well. The issue is when I see her engage and she almost like pulls guard sometimes, or she'll pull guard and then try to sweep immediately. I don't think that's going to fly against Jin Yu Frey, but I think that Victoria Dudakova picks up a clear decision win here against Jin Yu Frey, and just is the more active fighter and the fighter who wants it more. I don't see Jin Yu Frey in there looking like the same Jin Yu Frey that was, doing well on the regional scene. It just has not been a good UFC run for Jin Yu Frey, and Victoria Dudakova, I think, is a very, very solid play this week. I just think it's going to come in the decision, via decision, multiple takedowns, poor fight IQ, slightly sweating it out because she just makes things a little bit more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah, I think over in PrizePicks is just more of, her takedown prop for Dudakova is 2.5. I would much rather play the more than the less than, because I think you would you be sweating that out, went out over there. And like, yeah, what you said there, I mean, I think the best days we saw of Jin Yu Frey were more before she got to the UFC as opposed to what we see here in the UFC. Then our opening matchup, you got Magomedov taking on Silva. Silva in a very similar situation. He's been in this situation throughout his entire career, taking on another tough Russian. It's a guy that's taking on every tough Russian there is. Silva is a plus 205 betting favorite, minus 250 for Magomedov. Magomedov 8,600 DK. Silva is 7,600. And part of the story with Magomedov is the eye issue.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, knee-jerk reaction. I'm sitting there thinking, well, who the hell is this guy to come in to the UFC in his debut and is going to be a favorite over Bruno Silva, the guy that went 15 minutes against Michel Pereira? Alex Pereira, my bad, not Michel Pereira. But, who is this guy? And I researched, I'm like, oh, okay, I remember this guy. He's Shara Bullet Magomedov, a guy who has basically no vision in his right eye. And somehow he's passing medicals. I don't understand. But as far as kickboxing and striking is concerned, he's one of the most dangerous prospects we've seen in the sport. He's very violent. I think this guy has true issues, like outside the cage too, like bad anger, lashing out on people, just seems like a complete lunatic, will punch people at a grappling tournament, will stomp and kick them. This guy's just a guy. He seems like he's like, how people would act when they're like, having roid rage, except he's just pure anger all the time. So I don't know, man. All I'm saying is that Shara Magomedov against Bruno Silva is a fight that we're probably going to need. It's the first fight of the night, oddly enough, and I don't know how I'm going to avoid it because Bruno Silva will strike fine in boxing range, does not do well against kickers, and that's what Shara Magomedov is. He's a kicker before he's a puncher, and he kicks often. Kicks hard, kicks early, kicks often, blends his hands into his kicks, and we've seen Bruno Silva get out kickboxed against Gerald Mearshart and, got rocked and dropped and then submitted despite going 15 minutes against Alex Bahia. That's why MMA math, you just can't do it. It makes no sense. But yeah, like Bruno Silva clearly needs to blend takedowns in. And if he blends takedowns in, we've seen Shara Magomedov struggle with, defending takedowns. So I think crowd the kicker, mix your takedowns in is clearly the game plan for Bruno Silva to spoil the debut of Shara Magomedov. I'm going to lean, though, in the Shara Bullet Magomedov's side because I just can't see how you can get out kickboxed against Gerald Mearshart, take so much damage within your career, struggle consistently against kickers, and now face a guy who has some of the best kicks and most dynamic kicks against Shara Magomedov. So I'll be picking Shara in the middle range at 8,600 to finish Bruno Silva. But if this hits the mat, Magomedov does not have much. Despite that, last name, he does not have much on the mat. So I'm fine with increasing exposure to Bruno Silva. I think he's one of the best underdogs against an unproven UFC fighter. Very proven outside the promotion. But I think one way or another, you're going to need to smash this fight.
That's always a scary thing for me when you have someone that, has, regionally speaking, has got a lot of people's attention of what happens when he comes to the UFC. And it's one of those things that sometimes I'm just like, let me see kind of how it goes before I kind of really take a deep dive into it. So let's get into our straight up fight picks here. Main event, I'm going to go and still Islam Makhachev.
Unfortunately, I agree with you. I'm going to go with Islam Makhachev as well.
I will go Chimaev in the co-main event.
Chimaev.
I'll go Ankalaev.
Ankalaev.
I'll go Aliskerov.
Yep, I'm gonna go Ikram Aliskerov as well.
Nurmagomedov.
Magomed.
Even though I like Elliott as a cash play, I still think Mokaev gets it done with the grappling.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Mokaev.
I'll go Trevor Peak.
Going Trevor Peak, but I'm disappointed in myself.
Yeah. I'll go Basharat.
Basharat, but kind of how you said, I think Victor Henry is one of the best cash options out there.
Dumas. Give me Mike Breeden.
Breeden for the upset, baby.
Wood.
Nathaniel Wood.
Dudakova.
And
Magomedov.
Magomedov as well. Not too different, but
yeah. I mean, look, I wanted to get to more straight up underdogs to win, but it's just kind of more betting with my brain here on terms of my picks here. Over on PrizePicks, here's what I'll tell you what I like. I do like the more than 22.5 fight time minutes on Islam. I also like the 3 takedowns. Prefer the 3 takedown prop over there. I do like the more than 98.5 fantasy score on Khamzhat Chimaev. A gut feeling thinks that thing goes 15 minutes, so I probably go more than the 10-minute fight time. I like the under 10-minute fight time on Ankalaev, the more than 93.5 fantasy score on Ankalaev, more than 3 takedowns on Mokaev, less than 6.5 fight time minutes on Peak, less than 8.5 fight time minutes on Dumas. I do like the more than 1.5 takedowns on Jubli, so that's what I like over there on PrizePicks. We'll get over to our Discord questions before we get into the YouTube chat, as I know some of our people over there on Discord have already put in some questions here. So let's get to the first one. It says, if you had to bet on one underdog main event and co-main event, who would you and Pete pick?
I had to bet on one in the main or co-main?
I would prefer to go Volkanovski.
Yeah, agree.
I mean, to me, the question really is, I mean, look, you've got, Usman moving up in weight. at the back tail of his career, 36 years
It's
old.
15 pounds, not 10 pounds. That's 15 pounds. The gap between welterweight and middleweight is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I would much rather go the Volkanovski route, even though I do like both the favorites in the main event, co-main event. Next up says, I'm looking at a core of Chimaev, Mokaev, Peak, and Magomedov with Volk and Azaitar as key underdogs. What's your thoughts on this? What concerns me it's not on the back end of what you said there with Peak and Magomedov. It's more on the Chimaev Mokaev aspect of what if those go 15 minutes. And look here.
Sounds like a very common player chalky build. Not to hate on the lineup, but I feel like that's going to be duplicated a lot.
I feel like if you're in these massive GPP contests or like getting away from Volk, I think is probably a smart contrarian thing to do, just because I think Volk's going to be very highly owned in these GPPs of people looking in there. Next up, if you had to play lock one guy in all of your lineups, who would it be and why?
Who are you gonna lock?
One guy. Who would I lock? That's a damn good question.
I think it's got to be Islam Makhachev, despite my love for Alexander Volkanovski.
Yeah, I mean,
5-round fighter, priced mid-range. His opponent stepping up on short notice. His opponent's been suffering and dealing with an arm injury. Not ideal circumstances for Volkanovski at all. Maybe everybody's thinking that Volk's going to do it better this time. Perhaps he does it worse. That's if the way that I have to answer that question, that's my answer. But I wouldn't block anybody. There's so many damn options this week.
Yeah, look, I look at someone like Dumas and Peak just because of their fantasy score upside, but also I understand I'm playing with fire.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, best punt. I think we've labeled out the three options here of Victor Henry, Mike Breeden, and Tim Elliott. Mike Breeden probably I think has the best chance to win if you're looking for winners. I would probably rank it Breeden, Elliott, Henry.
Yeah, and I'm different. I'm going Breeden, Henry, Elliott.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you can go wrong with either one, because perhaps the Elliott Henry scores, they say they both lose, but they may not be that much different. And you have Elliott, who's $200 cheaper than Victor Henry, which that 200 can mean everything on a slate like this.
Next up, best leverage play. We got to see what ownership ends up. I've not seen ownership projections yet on this one. That's going to really play into it. Tristan, what I'll do is once ownership projections comes out, I'll answer it in Discord. Best takedown upside. Now this is an interesting one because I think there's some good options here. I mean, obviously you look at the main event of Makhachev. I think Ankalaev is another one. Mokaev to me would be another one. I'd probably still say just because of the 25-minute nature, I look at Islam.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's Islam for me. It still is Chimaev. I mean, did you see him pick up Daniel Cormier with a body lock? I mean, my God. I know that Zhang Wei Li picked up Francis Ngannou with a high crotch, but the high crotch lift is a lot easier than a body lock. And picking up DC with a body lock was very impressive for Chimaev. So maybe he out-wrestles Usman. But it's Ankalaev also. Ikram Aliskerov's a guy who can do it all, and he's a hell of a wrestler too, and that's a way to break Warlley ALves.
Okay, and then our asked question was ranking in 9K options, and we have 6 9K options, and he was the guy I was like, maybe he is that number one option in the 9K range at 9,500.
Yeah, he is to me. He is to me. I'm saying 1 Aliskerov.
Okay.
2 Mokaev.
Okay.
Now we get weird. Basharat's last. Who's second to last?
Dudikova?
I think you can make an argument for all. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. But I definitely think that it's Aliskerov over Mokaev, just from a finishing standpoint.
Correction, we have 7 fighters who are 9,000. I labeled Dudakova wrong.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably, I might say 7 Dudakova just because I think the thing goes 15 minutes.
You're a wrestler though, Jay.
I'd probably say Aliskerov 1, 2. I think I two. I'm looking at Mokaev and Ankalaev, and I'm looking at the grappling aspect, and I'm thinking fantasy score upside. If Mokaev goes out and does what he does in terms of grappling, he could just rake up a ton of points. So I'd probably put him 2. 3, I would say Ankalaev.
Yep.
4 through 7 could be anywhere. I mean,
I agree with you.
You know, I mean, if I was going to go,
I'd probably put Nathaniel Wood there.
I would probably put 7, Wood 4, and then 5, 6, 7.
Oh shit! Am I right? I mean, like Jubli.
I'd probably put Dudakova last, then Jubli, and then Basharat.
Basharat's the worst one. He's 9,400. Unless I'm going to be completely so off on this fight, but he's 9,400. He's only scored 98 fantasy points.
I know it's nuts out there. I mean, it is, and that's where you really got to use those ownership projections to figure out there what you got to do. Get to the YouTube comments here before we get out of here on this episode. Elliott is my favorite dog for GPPs. I don't mind that. I don't mind that, but to me, it really comes down to the question of, and that's an ownership play, I think, and the type of contest that you're playing in there. To see if there's any more. But we do appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of the podcast. Of course, if you can do us a favor, watch us on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. That truly does help us out a ton. If you want to leave a comment about something you heard on the show, be sure to do that as well. Pete, anything you want to leave the listeners with before we get out of here?
No, I mean, thank you guys for checking out the video, whether you guys are subscribed or not. If you could, though, subscribe to the channel. Join the Discord. The link's below in the description. Great conversations going on throughout the week, the weekend, all year round. I mean, this Discord's awesome. And sometimes I work so much and I go back and I check and I get lost.
Hey, you want to know how awesome they are? You remember you were wondering about what your Tim Elliott record is?
Did they keep track of it?
Matt has the record. He says that Pete is 2-2 in Elliott's last 4, while I am 3-1.
Yeah, I told you, I felt like I was 0-4. So, that's okay. But that's awesome. That means you guys care about what we say, and we care about you guys. So yeah. Yeah, man. The Discord, great community, totally free to join. You don't have to worry about we're not selling your picks or anything like that. You gotta go right there. Totally free to join. Great conversation we have in there. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Fight HQ podcast. We'll be back here next week to get you ready for UFC Fight Night. You always crack me up because damn well I don't know.
Okay, I can tell you. Yeah.
What's the main event, bro? Tell me. Who is it? Is it?
I'm pulling up the schedule right here. I know Joe's Miocic is December 11th. Let's see here.
Can't wait to hear this fight. I never heard of it
we don't have a UFC event next week.
There we go.
Our next UFC event is UFC Fight Night down in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Almeida versus Lewis. So we do have no show. We're about next Friday.
Oh, what's his name? Jailton Almeida. What a terrible fight for Derek Lewis. My goodness. Yeah,
because you remember it was supposed to be Curtis Blaze. Blaze gets injured. Derek Lewis now stepping in on that one. But yeah, pretty much for the most part, this is a Brazilian fight night card. No question about it. So, but we'll be back here in 2 weeks. Of course, we'll be in that Discord channel all weekend long, so be sure to check us out over there. And we appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of the Fight HQ podcast.